The word landed on the line at 6 minutes past 5 in the morning, and it landed the way a small stone lands in still water, and 40 dogs felt it before any of the humans did. "Sweetheart." Master Sergeant Roy Cole said it loud. He said it with a smile that was not a smile. He said it the way a man says a word when he has been saying it for 30 years and nobody in his life has ever told him to stop, because the people who would have told him to stop were not in rooms with men like Roy Cole, and the people who were in rooms with Roy Cole had long since learned that the price of correcting him was higher than the price of letting the word stand. The selection line was a wall of muscle and noise in the gray pre-dawn. 40 dogs. Malinois, mostly, narrow-skulled, copper-coated, the working line, the kind that comes out of the crate already vibrating at a frequency human beings are not built to hear. A handful of Dutch shepherds with brindled coats like burnt sugar. 2 German shepherds, both lean, both Eastline, both already showing the white of one eye at the noise. They were lunging at the ends of their leads. They were spinning. They were screaming, not barking, screaming, that high-cracked working dog scream that sounds like a saw blade caught in metal, and their handlers were braced against the pull, boots planted, fists wrapped twice around the leather, knuckles white. The whole row of them was a single organism of want. And at the far right end of the line stood a smaller, leaner Malinois, a female, dark mask, dark ears, the rest of her the color of old wheat. She was sitting. Her shoulders were down. Her tail was flat on the dirt behind her. Her front paws were squared. Her amber eyes were on Master Sergeant Roy Cole as he walked the line, and her amber eyes did not blink and did not waver, and she was not interested in him the way the other dogs were interested in him, which was to say she was not interested in eating him. She was interested in reading him. That was the first thing that should have told Cole something, if he had been the kind of man who could be told things. The handler standing at the end of that lead was Corporal Alana Reese, 28 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, 131 pounds in boots. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painted on. Her uniform was clean but not new. The knees had been restitched twice. The cuffs had the soft white fade of something that had been hand-washed in a sink in 3 different countries. She stood at parade rest the way she had been taught at 19 and had not stopped standing for 9 years, and her face was the kind of face that does not change much regardless of what is happening to it, because a long time ago Corporal Alana Reese had figured out that the cost of letting her face change was a cost she did not want to keep paying. The dog at her side was named Saint. The dog at her side had been named Saint at 6 weeks old, in a kennel run by an old man in Central Texas who did not believe in raising war dogs with sticks, and the old man was Reese's grandfather, and the old man had been dead 2 years and 7 months on the morning Roy Cole walked the line and called his granddaughter sweetheart. Cole walked slow. He liked walking slow. He liked the way the dogs hit the ends of their leads when he passed, the way the handler's arms jerked, the way the whole row of muscle and noise leaned toward him as if he were the thing they had been built to bite. It confirmed something for him every time. It told him that what he had built, this program, this standard, this line in the dirt that separated working dogs from pets, was real. The screaming was the proof. The screaming was the receipt. He stopped at the end of the line. He looked down at Saint. Saint looked up at him. For 1 long second nothing happened, and in that second a thing passed between the dog and the man that the dog understood and the man did not, which was that the dog had already decided he was not a threat and had already filed him away, and was now watching him the way a librarian watches a man wandering the wrong aisle. Cole's lip did the thing it did. The corner pulled up. Not a smile. The shape of a smile, performed by a face that had forgotten what the original was for. "What's this?" he said. "Saint, Master Sergeant," Reese said. Her voice was flat and even and pitched low. "My partner." "Your partner." He let the word hang. He turned half a step so that the handlers down the line could hear him, and he raised his voice just enough that they would. "Your partner." Then he did the thing. He crouched. He dropped down into the dog space. Not slow, not asking, the way every handler on that line had been trained from week one to never, ever do with a strange working dog. He dropped down fast and close, his face maybe 16 inches from Saint's face, his weight forward on the balls of his feet, his hands loose at his sides in the deliberate "I am not afraid of you" posture of a man who had spent 30 years using his fearlessness as a weapon against animals that could not afford to bite him. Saint did not move. Saint did not snap. Saint did not lift her lip. Saint did not even shift her weight. She held exactly where she was, and she did one small thing, one thing Cole did not see because he was not looking for it. She flicked her eyes, 1/4 second sideways, to Reese. "Is this okay?" Reese did not move her head. She did not move her hand. She did one small thing back, one thing Cole did not see because he was not looking for it. She let out a slow breath through her nose, the kind of breath that says yes, hold, in a language that does not use words. Saint held. Cole, 16 inches from her face, read the calm as absence. Read the stillness as nothing. Read the discipline as the lack of a thing instead of the presence of a thing, because men like Roy Cole have been reading the world that way their entire lives, and the world has, for the most part, agreed to be read. He stood up. He brushed his knees off, slowly, with the back of his hand, the way a man does when he wants the gesture to be seen. He turned to the line. "She's soft," he announced. It carried. The morning air was cold and flat, and it carried the word all the way down to the last handler, and the last handler heard it, and the last handler's face did the small involuntary thing faces do when they hear a thing being said about someone else and feel relief that it is not being said about them. "Look at her," Cole said. He gestured down the line, sweeping his arm across the row of screaming, spinning, lunging dogs. This is what runs through this program. This is what bites a man through a sleeve and doesn't let go when the gun goes off next to its head. This is what you put in front of a door at 3 in the morning in Helmand, and you trust to do its job whether you're alive behind it or not. This is a war dog. He turned back. He looked down at Saint, who was sitting, who had not moved, who was watching him the way she had been watching him for the entire 90 seconds since he had first walked into her field of vision. "This," Cole said, "is a pet." He let it land. The handlers down the line did not laugh. Not yet. They were waiting to see if it was the kind of moment where laughing was permitted. "You raised this thing on cuddles and cookies and clicker games in your grandmother's backyard," he said, and he had no way of knowing how close to bone that one had landed, no way of knowing about the old man and the kennel in Central Texas and the 2 years and 7 months. But Reese's face did not change, because Reese's face did not change about things like that anymore. "And you brought it to a real trial." A pause. "Bring your little pet to a real trial," he said slowly, savoring it, "and watch it fold like the rest of them fold." Now the laughter came. Not all of it. Maybe a third of the line. The nervous kind. The kind men give when they are glad it is not them in the crosshairs, and they want the man holding the crosshairs to know they are on his side. One of the Dutch Shepherd handlers laughed the loudest, a tall kid named Petrov, and his dog jerked at the sound and twisted on the lead and snapped at the air, and Petrov yanked the dog back hard by the prong, and the dog made a small choked sound, and Petrov did not look at the dog. Reese saw it. She did not turn her head. She saw it anyway. She let them laugh. She let them laugh because the performance was more important than her pride, and her pride had never been the point. She said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." Flat. Even. No inflexión. The 2 words a soldier says when the only other option is the wrong option. Cole nodded once, satisfied, and moved on down the line in the other direction, and as he passed her she dropped her right hand very slightly. Just dropped it, palm open at her side, and Saint leaned the side of her head into the palm for 1/2 second, the lightest possible contact, and then faced front again. That small thing. That lean. 1/2 second. Maybe less. If Cole had been a different man, he would have seen it and he would have understood in that 1/2 second every single thing he was about to be wrong about for the rest of the day. He would have seen that the dog was not soft. He would have seen that the dog was choosing. He would have seen that what looked like absence in that animal was in fact a discipline so deep that it had gone quiet, the way deep water goes quiet, the way a thing that knows itself does not need to announce itself. But Cole was not a different man. Cole was the man who had just walked the line. The selection course at Camp Bowie spread out behind the briefing tent like a small bad town. 300 acres of East Central Texas scrub, fenced and refenced, broken up by plywood building facades and shipping containers stacked too high, and a long low concrete bunker that the instructors called the church for reasons nobody ever explained to the candidates. There was a burn pit at the south end where they ran smoke drills. There was a sound stage at the west end where they ran gunfire and IED simulation, rigged with omnidirectional speakers that could push 130 decibels of mortar walk into a closed room without warning. There was a mock village at the center, 14 structures, dirt streets, a fake well, and 73 pre-mapped hide points where a man could put a target, narcotics, explosives, a person, a body, and ask a dog to find it. The multi-purpose canine selection at Bowie ran 4 times a year. It took 40 pairs in. It moved, on average, 4 pairs forward. 10%. That was the number Cole was proud of. He said it in every opening brief. He said it the way other men said their kill counts. 10%. The other 90 go home and tell their grandkids they tried. He said it, and he watched the room, and he watched which faces tightened and which faces went smooth, and he made his first cut right there in the briefing tent, before a single dog had touched the dirt. The thing he did not say, the thing the after-action report said in language that had been carefully sanded down until it could pass through a Pentagon inbox without snagging on anything, was that the pairs that washed out of Bowie did not always go home whole. Some of them went home with dogs that could not work anywhere else after what had happened to them on the course. Some of them went home with dogs that had to be retired at 4 years old because the drive had been broken out of them by men who confused breaking a dog with training a dog. Some of them did not go home at all because one of them, a sergeant named Hollis 2 years ago, had eaten his service pistol in the parking lot of a motel in Brownwood on the 4th night of the course, and Hollis's dog had been rehomed 3 times in 18 months and was now living, the last anyone had heard, in a backyard in Oklahoma with a chain-link fence and a tether and the kind of silence that working dogs do not survive. Cole did not talk about Hollis. Cole talked about the 10%. The opening brief that morning ran 22 minutes. Cole stood at the front of the tent with his hands clasped behind his back and walked them through the 4-day schedule. Day 1, baseline obedience, handler-dog connection assessment, single discipline detection runs. Day 2, bite work, controlled aggression, environmental stress. Day 3, multidiscipline runs under increasing chaos. Day 4. The final problem. The church. The thing every candidate had heard rumors about, and no candidate was allowed to be briefed on in advance, because the entire point of the final problem was that a real working pair could not be briefed on what was coming. A real working pair handled what arrived. Reese sat in the 3rd row. Saint lay at her feet, chin on her boot, eyes half closed but not closed, the way Saint had been lying at her feet for 6 years. Petrov sat 2 rows up with his Dutch shepherd between his knees. The dog was panting, a fast, shallow pant, even though the tent was cold. Reese had clocked that pant inside the first 30 seconds of sitting down. It was not a tired pant. It was not a hot pant. It was the pant of a dog whose cortisol had been elevated since the parking lot, and probably since the drive-in, and probably since whatever had happened in Petrov's hotel room the night before. She watched the back of the dog's head and thought very quietly, "You poor thing." Saint, without opening her eyes, sighed once through her nose. Reese did not look down. She let her right boot, the one Saint's chin was resting on, lift very slightly off the floor, a 1/4 inch no more, and then settle. The smallest possible acknowledgement. "I see her too. I know. Eyes front." Saint's tail thumped once, soft, against the canvas floor. Cole was talking about washouts. Cole was talking about how the program did not exist to make anyone feel good. Cole was talking about how the only metric that mattered at Bowie was whether the pair in front of him could be trusted, on day one of a deployment, to walk a door in a country whose name half of Congress could not pronounce, and find the thing behind the door, and not get the operator behind them killed in the finding. "There is no participation trophy in this room," Cole said. "There is no second place. There is the 4 pairs that go forward, and there is everyone else, and everyone else is a story I will not remember by Friday." He paused. "Some of you," he said, "are going to figure out by tomorrow afternoon that you should not have come. I want you to know now that I respect the ones who self-eliminate before they cost their dog something the dog can't get back. That is the only honorable wash, and it is still a wash." He looked, when he said it, at 3 faces in the room. He looked at a tall, thin Marine in the front row whose dog had been shaking in the staging area. He looked at a woman in the second row with a German Shepherd that was too old for the course, and everyone in the room except her knew it. And then his eyes traveled to the third row, and they landed on Reese, and they stayed there for a beat longer than they had stayed on the other 2. Reese looked back. Her face did not change. Cole's lip did the thing it did. He moved on. Saint, at her feet, opened her eyes. The first exercise of day 1 was called the baseline. It was the simplest thing on the course, and it was the thing that broke the most pairs, which was the entire point. A dog and handler walked into a 50 by 50 foot fenced ring. Inside the ring there were 6 objects: a tire, a wooden crate, a length of PVC pipe, a duffel bag, a folding chair, and a cinder block. Hidden in one of the objects, and only one, was a training scent. The handler did not know which. The dog did not know which. The instructors had placed the scent 20 minutes before the pair entered, which meant the scent had bloomed but had not begun to drift, which meant the find was clean if the dog was clean. The handler had 3 minutes. The handler could not touch the dog. The handler could not point. The handler could give one verbal cue at the start and could give corrections in the form of redirection only, here, search this, the working vocabulary no more. A handler who got physical with the dog inside the ring failed the exercise. A handler who corrected the dog with the lead failed the exercise. A handler whose dog quit, sat down, or began to display avoidance, yawning, sniffing the ground in stress patterns, scratching, failed the exercise. It was, on paper, a Tuesday morning warm-up. Every dog in that staging area had run this exercise 1,000 times in their home kennels. 12 pairs ran it before Reese. 4 passed. 8 did not. Reese watched from the staging fence with Saint at heel. She did not lean on the fence. She did not cross her arms. She stood the way she had been standing since the brief, hands loose at her sides, weight even, and she watched. Petrov ran 6th. His Dutch Shepherd hit the ring at a sprint, overshot the duffel bag, came back, overshot the tire, came back, and then started to spin. That tight tail-chasing spin a high-drive dog does when its cortisol has overwhelmed its nose and the search has become a panic. Petrov shouted search 3 times in 12 seconds, each time louder, and on the 4th shout he stepped toward the dog and the dog flinched, and the flinch was the tell, and Cole, standing at the corner of the ring with a clipboard, made a single mark and said time. Reset. Out. Petrov walked his dog out of the ring with his jaw set and his free hand in a fist. He passed Reese on the way to the staging area. He did not look at her. He looked at Saint, just for a second, and his mouth did something complicated, and then he was passed. Reese was called 8th. She walked into the ring slow. Saint walked at her left heel. Saint's tail was level. Saint's ears were forward but soft, not pinned. Saint was breathing through her nose, slow and even, and her amber eyes were already moving, not searching yet, cataloging, taking in the 6 objects and their positions and the wind, which was coming off the east at maybe 3 miles per hour, light enough that it would carry scent without breaking it. Reese stopped at the center mark. She did not look at Cole. She did not look at the clipboard. She looked down at Saint, just once, and Saint looked up at her, just once, and a thing passed between them that had been passing between them for 6 years, which was the thing the old man in Central Texas had spent 40 years learning how to build, which was the only thing he had managed to give his granddaughter before the cancer took the last of him on a Wednesday afternoon in March of a year Reese did not let herself think about on workdays. She said one word: find. She did not say it loud. She said it the way you would say a name to someone sitting next to you on a couch. Conversational. Low. Find. Saint moved. She did not sprint. She did not lunge. She walked, a working walk, head at shoulder height, nose neither up nor down, her body moving in that loose diagonal trot working dogs fall into when they have decided to use their nose instead of their eyes. She passed the tire without stopping. She passed the folding chair. She slowed at the duffel bag for 1/2 second, ticked her head a 1/4 inch, and moved on. She walked the wooden crate, the PVC pipe, and stopped. Saturday. Stared at the cinder block. Did not move. 41 seconds. Total. Reese walked over. She did not praise. She did not pet. She crouched, looked at the cinder block, looked at Saint, and said, "Show me." Saint touched her nose to the cinder block, very lightly, once on a specific spot, the lower left corner, where there was a hairline crack in the concrete maybe 2 inches long. Reese stood up. She turned to Cole. She said, "Alert at the cinder block, Master Sergeant. Lower left." Cole did not move for a long second. Then he walked over. He looked at the cinder block. He bent, lifted it, and tilted it. The scent vial, a tiny glass tube no bigger than a lipstick, was wedged into a hollow inside the block, accessible only through that hairline crack. The 4 instructors at the corners of the ring did not say anything. Cole straightened up. He looked at the dog. The dog was sitting, exactly where she had been sitting, watching him. "Too clean," Cole said. He said it loud enough for the staging fence to hear. "Too clean what, Master Sergeant?" Reese said. "Flat. Even. Too clean for a working dog at hour 1, day 1, of an MPC selection." He was looking at Saint now, not at Reese. "That's a show dog run. That's a demonstration dog. You've drilled this exact configuration." "Negative, Master Sergeant. You've drilled cinder blocks." "Negative, Master Sergeant. We have not drilled cinder blocks in the last 90 days. Cole turned his head finally and looked at her. "You're telling me," he said, "that your dog found the only crack in a cinder block, in 41 seconds, on a course she has never seen, against a scent she had no warm-up on, and she did it because she's good." "Yes, Master Sergeant." He looked at her. He looked at the dog. He made a mark on his clipboard, and Reese could not see what the mark was, but she could see the angle of the pen, and the angle of the pen was not the angle of a pass. "Pass," Cole said. "Conditional. We'll see." He turned away. Reese said, "Yes, Master Sergeant." She walked Saint out of the ring at the same pace she had walked in. She did not look back. At the staging fence she stopped, dropped her right hand to her side, and Saint leaned the side of her head into the palm for 1/2 second. "Good girl, I saw you, I know." And then they faced front, and Reese went to the water station to refill Saint's collapsible bowl, and she did not let her face change, because her face did not change about things like that anymore. But somewhere very deep, in a place she did not visit during workdays, a small voice that sounded like an old man in Central Texas said, "Easy, Laney. He's already losing. He just hasn't figured it out yet." She refilled the bowl. She set it down. Saint drank. The sun was coming up. It was 7:14 in the morning, and there were 3.5 days to go. The thing about the baseline run was that other people had seen it. Not just Cole. Not just the 4 instructors at the corners of the ring. 39 other handlers had been standing at that staging fence, and handlers, real ones, know what they are looking at. They had watched 100 dogs run that ring over the years, in their home kennels, at qualifications, at trials. They knew the difference between a dog that finds because it has been drilled into the find and a dog that finds because it is hunting. They knew the difference between obedience and partnership. And every one of them had watched a small wheat-colored Malinois walk into a cold ring and solve a problem in 41 seconds without her handler so much as raising her voice, and a certain number of them had felt something move in their chest that they did not have a word for, and the word, if they had reached for it, would have been shame. Because most of them yelled at their dogs. Most of them had been taught to yell. Most of them had come up through programs where the lead was a tool of correction and the prong was a fact of life, and the relationship between a handler and a dog was understood, fundamentally, as a relationship between a manager and an asset. They loved their dogs. That was not in question. You did not do this work without loving the dog. But they had been taught that love and command were separate systems, that the dog worked because it had been made to work, the drive was something you compelled and obedience was something you enforced, and the best of them, the ones who would make the 10%, had gotten very, very good at compelling and enforcing. And then they had watched a woman say, "Find the way you'd say it to a friend." By the staging fence, after Reese walked Saint out, 2 handlers were standing close enough to talk without being heard. One was a Marine Staff Sergeant named Delgado, mid-30s, with a coal-black Dutch Shepherd named Argo that was, by common agreement in the staging area, the single most impressive animal on the course. Argo was a missile. Argo had run the baseline in 58 seconds, and Delgado had barely had to speak. Delgado was good. Delgado knew he was good. Delgado was the kind of competitor who watched everyone else's runs because information was a weapon and he intended to win. The other was a younger soldier, an army specialist named Wright, whose German Shepherd had passed the baseline by a hair and who was, privately, already wondering if he had any business being here at all. 41 seconds, Wright said. "I saw it," Delgado said. He called it too clean. Delgado didn't answer right away. He was watching Reese at the water station, the way she crouched, the way she set the bowl down, the way the dog drank and then looked up at her, and the way she did not reach down to touch the dog even though every line of her body looked like it wanted to. "It wasn't too clean," Delgado said finally. "It was just clean. He's never seen clean before, so he doesn't know what it is." Wright looked at him. "Don't repeat that," Delgado said. "I won't. I mean it. Don't repeat that." "I won't, Staff Sergeant." Delgado watched Reese stand up. He watched the dog fall into heel without being told. He watched the 2 of them walk back toward the staging area as a single unit, the dog's shoulder exactly at the seam of the woman's trouser leg, neither of them looking at the other, both of them perfectly aware of where the other was. "That's 11 years of work," Delgado said quietly. "Minimum. That's somebody who started that dog right and never once took a shortcut. You don't get that out of a kennel program. You get that out of a person's whole life." He turned and walked his missile back toward the shade. Wright stood at the fence a moment longer, watching the woman and the dog, and the thing he did not have a word for moved in his chest again. Day 1 ground forward. The single discipline runs got harder through the morning. Longer search areas. More distractors. A second scent introduced as a decoy, so the dog had to discriminate, had to walk past the thing it had been trained its whole life to find in order to find the right thing. Pairs started to come apart. By noon, 6 more had washed, 3 for failed discrimination, 2 for handler corrections inside the search area, 1 for a dog that simply quit, lay down in the middle of a container yard, and would not get up, and the handler had stood over the dog with his hands on his hips and his face going through a sequence of expressions that ended somewhere near grief. Reese watched that one. The handler was a good man, you could tell. The dog wasn't broken by him. The dog was just done, overcooked somewhere upstream in some home program, by some accumulation of pressure that had finally hit its limit in a container yard in central Texas at 11:40 in the morning. The handler knelt down next to his dog and put his hand on the dog's ribs and said something nobody else could hear, and then he clipped the lead on and walked the dog out. And he did the honorable wash, the only honorable wash, and Cole made a mark and said nothing, and the man and his done dog disappeared toward the parking lot and the long drive home. Saint watched them go. Reese watched Saint watch them go. "Not us," Reese said very quietly, not moving her lips much. "We're all right. Eyes front." Saint's eyes came front. In the afternoon they ran the connection assessment, the exercise Cole had named and Cole privately believed in more than any other, even though he would have described it in exactly the opposite terms than the terms that would have been honest. The exercise was simple. A handler and dog walked into a 100-meter lane. At the far end of the lane was a target, a man in a bite suit, holding a clatter stick. The handler walked. The dog walked at heel. Halfway down the lane, on a signal the handler could not see, the man in the bite suit began to do things. Yell, slap the stick on the ground, jog in place, take 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, escalating, in a pattern the dog had never seen. The handler was not allowed to give a single command from the start of the lane to the end of it. The dog was supposed to stay at heel. The dog was supposed to read the handler's body and decide, from that alone, whether the threat at the end of the lane was a threat or was not yet a threat. Most dogs broke. That was the point. Most dogs, faced with a man yelling and a stick clattering at the end of a lane, did what every working dog is bred to do, which is to launch. Most handlers, faced with a dog launching, did what every handler learns to do under stress, which is to grab the lead. The grab was the fail. The launch without command was the fail. The exercise was designed to expose pairs whose connection lived only in the calm, pairs that worked when nothing was happening and came apart the second something was. Reese was called 12th. By the time it was her turn, 3 pairs had launched, for had been pulled by handlers who couldn't take the not knowing. And 1 pair, Delgado and Argo, had walked the lane clean, the missile staying at heel even as the bite suit man got within 10 feet and screamed in his face, Argo's whole body shaking with the want to bite and his paws never leaving the ground. Delgado had walked Argo out with a small tight nod and his free hand resting, for 1 second, on the back of the dog's neck. That had been the run of the morning. Reese stepped into the lane. The bite suit man at the end was a contractor named Bukowski, a former recon Marine who did this work for a living and who had, over the years, made a study of breaking the dogs that came down the lane at him. Bukowski was good. Bukowski knew the moment. Bukowski had been watching from the tower all morning, and he had watched the baseline run too, and he had decided in advance that he was going to find out what kind of dog the wheat-colored one really was. Reese started walking. Saint walked at heel. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. The dog's shoulder at the seam of her trouser leg, the dog's ear soft forward, the dog's breathing through her nose, the dog's tail level and quiet behind her. They moved the way 2 people move who have walked 1,000 miles together. Reese's eyes were on the far end of the lane. Her hands were loose at her sides. Her right hand was the closest thing to Saint, and Saint, without looking up, knew exactly where that hand was. At the 50-meter mark, Bukowski moved. He didn't yell first. He went off script. He took a hard step forward, not 3, just 1, and dropped his weight low, and he made a sound from his chest that was not a word. It was the sound a predator makes, low and wet, and he held the bite stick out to his side and let it hang. It was a thing he had never done before in 5 years on the lane. Reese did not flinch. Reese did not change her pace. Reese did not look down. What she did was breathe. She let out one slow breath through her nose. The same breath she had let out at the staging line that morning when Cole had crouched in Saint's face. Quiet. Conversational. Hold. Saint held. Saint's left ear, the one closest to Reese, flicked once, the smallest possible flick, the universal dog signal for "I heard you, I'm with you." The right ear stayed on Bukowski. The amber eyes stayed on Bukowski. Every muscle in the dog's body stayed exactly where Reese's body told her to stay, which was at heel, walking, eyes front, breathing slow. Bukowski escalated. He yelled. He swung the stick. He took the 3 steps forward and the 2 back, the choreographed thing, the standard thing, and Saint did not move, and then he went off script again, and he came all the way down the lane at a dead sprint, 20 meters, 16 meters, 12 meters, the stick raised, his face a mask of bite suit theater, and he made every dog trigger sound a man could make from a chest the size of his. Saint walked. At 10 meters Reese had to pass him, because the lane went all the way to the back fence, and the rules of the exercise said you walked until you walked, and the dog held until the handler released. Reese walked. Bukowski stopped, 8 feet to her right, panting, and as she passed him he leaned in, much closer than was sanctioned, and he said low and right at Saint's ear, "Come on, baby." It was the meanest thing he had in his bag. It was the soft voice. The handler voice. The voice that says, "Come here, I'm safe." He had used it twice before in 5 years, and both times the dog had broken, because there is no betrayal in a dog's world more profound than a strange man using the voice that is supposed to mean home. Saint walked. Her ear did not even flick. Reese walked her past Bukowski, past the bite suit, all the way to the back fence, and at the fence she turned, and she stopped, and she stood at parade rest, and she looked across the 100 meters at Cole, who was standing at the start of the lane with his clipboard, and she waited. The instructor at the back fence said quietly, "Release your dog, Corporal." Reese dropped her right hand. Saint leaned her head into the palm. Half a second. Reese said, "Off duty." Saint sat. Her whole body unwound by maybe 10%. Her tail moved once against the dirt. The lane was silent. Bukowski, 8 feet from the spot he had stopped in, was standing with a bite stick at his side and his bite suit hood half pulled back, and he was looking down the lane at the small wheat-colored dog the way a man looks at a thing he does not understand. He walked, slowly, the 80 meters back to Cole. He didn't say it to Cole. He said it to the instructor with the clipboard, loud enough for Cole to hear. "Mock her clean." I gave her the soft voice. The instructor's pen stopped. "You gave her the soft voice." "Yeah." The instructor looked at Cole. Cole's face did not change. The instructor wrote something on the clipboard. Bukowski looked once down the lane, at the woman at parade rest and the dog at her side, and then he looked at Cole, and what he said next he said quietly, but he said it. "I've never seen one hold against the soft voice, Roy." Cole said, "Walk it off, Buko." Bukowski walked it off. But by the staging fence, where the other handlers had been watching, the silence was a different silence than the silence after the baseline. The baseline silence had been the silence of that was clean. This silence was the silence of what did we just see. Down at the back fence Reese clipped the lead to Saint's collar. She did not praise. She did not pet. She turned and walked the lane back, and Saint walked at heel, and when she passed Bukowski she did not look at him, and when she passed Cole she stopped at the start mark and said, "Corporal Reese and Saint, returning Master Sergeant." Cole looked at her over the clipboard for a long second. "Conditional pass," he said. "Yes, Master Sergeant." She walked Saint to the staging area. She refilled the water bowl. Saint drank. She crouched and ran her hand down Saint's back once, slow root to tail, the only touch she had given the dog since dawn, and Saint pressed up into her hand for 1/2 second and then settled. "Good girl," Reese said. "Quiet." Just for the dog. That was a hard one. I know. Saint's tail thumped twice against the dirt. Across the staging area, Delgado was watching. He didn't say anything to write. He just stood there with his arms crossed and his missile of a dog at his side, and after a long moment he uncrossed his arms and walked over to the water station, 2 pairs down from Reese, and refilled Argo's bowl, and as he stood up he said, not loud, not soft, just at the volume of 2 professionals at a water station. Good run, Corporal. Reese didn't look up. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. That was all. That was the whole exchange. But every handler within 30 feet had heard it, and every handler within 30 feet knew what it meant, because Delgado had not said a word to a single other handler all morning, and Delgado did not say good run unless he meant it, and Delgado meant it. Cole, halfway across the yard with his clipboard, had heard it too. His face did not change, but he made a mark. That night, in the bunk room, the candidates slept 4 to a room in prefab barracks at the north end of the base. The dogs slept in kennels in the building next door, climate-controlled, individual runs, the only piece of infrastructure at Bowie that the Marine Corps had not cheaped out on. Reese had a top bunk in a room with 3 other women, a Coast Guard petty officer named Hayes, an Air Force tech sergeant named Becky, and a National Guard sergeant named Pulaski. They had all passed both runs that day. They had all watched Reese's runs from the staging fence. None of them had said anything to her about it through the evening, which Reese appreciated. At 9:40 p.m. the lights were out and the room was dark and Reese was lying on her back on the top bunk with her hands folded on her stomach and her eyes open, looking at the textured ceiling tile 6 feet above her face. Across the room in the dark, Hayes said, Reese. Yeah. Where'd you get her? Reese was quiet for a long second. Bred her, she said. Bred her where? Texas. My grandfather's kennel. He still run it? No. Sold it? No. There was a pause. Hayes was a good woman. Hayes had heard the tone. Sorry, Hayes said. Didn't mean to push. It's all right. The room was quiet again. The HVAC clicked on, ran for a minute, clicked off. Becky, who had not spoken, spoke. My handler at Lackland used to say you can train a dog to do anything in 18 months. He said it like it was a good thing. I've been thinking about that all day. Pulaski said, yeah. Hayes said, yeah. Reese said, he wasn't wrong. You can. You just shouldn't. The room was quiet for a longer time after that. Reese closed her eyes. In the dark, behind her eyes, she saw the old man. She saw him the way she always saw him when she let him in, which was standing in the long grass at the back of the kennel in Central Texas in late afternoon light, in jeans and a faded blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and his hands were the part she remembered most clearly, big and brown and scarred across the knuckles from 40 years of dogs, holding a 6-week-old wheat-colored puppy under the ribs like the puppy was made of something he was afraid of. Breaking. This one, Laney, he had said. This one is yours. Don't you ruin her. She had been 22 years old. She had said, how do I not ruin her, Pop? And the old man, holding the puppy, had looked at her for a long second with the eyes that had looked at her since she was 4 years old. And he had said the thing she had carried for 6 years, the thing she would carry until the day she died, the thing that was the whole entire compressed sum of 40 years of him learning what he had learned. Fear is a broadcast, Laney. Calm is a choice. A dog hears the broadcast. A dog follows the choice. You decide which one you are, every single day, and she will be whoever you decided to be that morning. That's it. That's the whole thing. The rest is just ours. She had said, Pop, that can't be the whole thing. And the old man had smiled, and handed her the puppy, and said, suit yourself. Spend the next 40 years finding out. 2 years and 7 months ago, on a Wednesday afternoon in March, in a hospice bed in a single-story house outside of Brady, Texas, with his big scarred hand in her hand and Saint lying on the floor next to the bed with her chin on his boot, the old man had opened his eyes one last time, and he had looked at his granddaughter, and what he had said, what he had used the last clear breath he had in him to say, was, "Don't let them yell at her, Lainey. Promise me. Don't ever let them yell at her." She had promised. He had closed his eyes. Saint had stayed under his boot for 4 more hours, until the funeral home people came, and then she had gotten up, and she had walked out of the room behind Reese, and she had not looked back. In the bunk in Central Texas, 28 months and 11 days later, Corporal Alana Reese opened her eyes in the dark. She looked at the ceiling tile. She said very quietly, in a voice nobody in the room could hear, "Tomorrow, Pop. We're all right. Eyes front." She closed her eyes. She slept. Day 2 was bite work. Day 2 was the day the program separated the dogs that could deliver controlled aggression on command from the dogs that could not, and it was the day, historically, that the most pairs washed, because bite work under stress is the single most honest thing a working dog does. A dog cannot fake a bite. A dog cannot half bite. A dog either commits or does not commit, and the commitment, or the failure to commit, is the entire record of how that dog has been raised. Cole loved Day 2. Cole loved Day 2 more than he loved any other day of the course, and Cole loved Day 2 because Day 2 was where his philosophy, the philosophy of edge, of drive, of compelled aggression, was supposed to be the philosophy that won. That was the part he was about to find out about. The first bite exercise was straightforward, a decoy in a full suit, 50 meters out, agitating with a sleeve and a clatter stick. The handler held the dog on a long line. On command, the dog was released. The dog ran the 50 meters. The dog hit the suit. The dog held until called off. It was the exercise every dog in that staging area had run 1,000 times. 8 pairs ran it before Reese. 6 committed clean. 2 did not. 1 dog hit and released early, ticking back to the handler in confusion. 1 dog ran the 50 meters and pulled up at the last 6 feet, slowed to a trot, circled the decoy, and would not engage. Both pairs were washed. The handler of the dog that pulled up walked his dog off the field with his free hand over his mouth. Delgado and Argo ran 9th. Argo hit the suit at full extension, locked on, held through the redirection commands the decoy was scripted to throw, and released on Delgado's first call. Textbook. Better than textbook. The decoy, walking back to the staging area, made a small respectful gesture toward Delgado that nobody else saw. Reese was called 11th. She walked Saint to the start line. She knelt and unclipped the long line from Saint's flat collar and clipped it instead to the agitation harness she had brought from home, soft, well-worn, padded across the chest. Cole, watching from the side, made a note on his clipboard. "Harness," he said. "Yes, Master Sergeant." "You bite train on a harness." "Yes, Master Sergeant." "Why?" Reese stood up. She did not look at Cole. She looked down the field at the decoy, who was warming up at 50 meters, swinging the sleeve in slow loops. Because a dog that bites on a flat collar learns to bite past the pressure on her trachea, Master Sergeant. A dog that bites on a harness learns to bite because she chose to bite. The first one bites because it hurts to think. The second one bites because she decided. I wanted the second one. Cole looked at her. He looked at the dog. He made a mark on the clipboard. "Decoys ready," he said. "On my signal." Reese took the long line in her left hand. She did not crouch over Saint. She did not lean down and whisper anything in the dog's ear. She stood up straight, eyes down the field, and Saint stood beside her in agitation posture, weight forward, ears pinned now for the first time all day, every muscle alive, the wheat-colored coat showing the cut of muscle underneath that the casual eye had missed for 2 days running. This was the dog Cole had not seen. This was the dog that lived under the calm. The decoy escalated. He yelled. He swung the sleeve. He made the come-and-get-me motion that 50 meters of distance and 1,000 generations of breeding had taught every Malinois in human history to answer. Saint did not move. She quivered. The whole length of her quivered, the way a drawn bowstring quivers. But she did not move. She had not been told. Cole's hand went up. Cole's hand came down. "Send," he said. Reese said, "Get him." Saint went. She went the way a thing goes that has been waiting its entire life to go, and the 50 meters disappeared under her in a streak of wheat and dust, and at the last 6 feet she launched, and she hit the decoy in the center of the sleeve at the exact point the bite suit was reinforced for it, and her jaws locked, and her body folded into the bite the way water folds into a vessel, and the decoy, who was a big man, 210 pounds, staggered 2 steps sideways under the impact and braced, and Saint hung off the sleeve with her hind legs off the ground, full body weight on the bite, and the decoy began the redirection sequence. He spun. He pulled. He brought the clatter stick down on Saint's hindquarters. Not hard but loud, the test was for the noise, and Saint did not release. He pivoted and used his hip to drive her off the ground, and she rode the pivot like she had been born on it, and her bite did not shift. He yelled. He cursed. He used the soft voice for half a second. "Easy, sweetheart, easy." And Saint's bite stayed clean and locked and on the sleeve and only on the sleeve, because a dog that has been raised on choice does not get confused by tone. A dog raised on choice knows what she came for, and she came for the sleeve. The decoy looked across the field at Cole. Cole's signal. Reese said, "Out." Saint released. She released cleanly on the first call, and she dropped to all 4 paws and stepped back from the decoy by exactly the regulation distance, and she sat, and she watched the decoy. Ready, body still loaded, head up, eyes amber and steady and entirely without confusion. The decoy, breathing hard inside the suit, said one word, loud enough for the staging fence to hear. "Damn." Reese said, "Saint. Heel." Saint heeled. They walked back up the field to the start line, and Cole was standing there with his clipboard, and for the first time in 2 days his face did something. It was not much. It was a thing that lasted less than a second. The muscle along his jaw tightened, and the corner of his mouth, the corner that did the not smile, did not do the not smile. It just stayed flat. And his eyes, for that less than a second, were not the eyes of a man who had decided what he was looking at. They were the eyes of a man who had just been shown a thing he had no shelf to put it on. Then it was gone. The shelf reasserted itself. The jaw unlocked. "Pass," Cole said. "Not conditional. Just pass." He caught it a half beat after he said it, and Reese caught him catching it, and neither of them said anything about the missing word. "Yes, Master Sergeant." She walked Saint off the field. And here is the thing you have to understand about a man like Roy Cole, because the story does not work if you do not understand it. He was not a fraud. That is the easy version, and the easy version is a lie. Roy Cole had handled dogs in 3 wars. Roy Cole had walked behind a dog through doors in places that do not appear on maps, and Roy Cole had buried 2 of his own dogs and 1 of his own handlers, and the thing he believed, the thing about edge and drive and compelled aggression, he believed it because it had kept him alive, and it had kept the men behind him alive, in years when being wrong got you a folded flag. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had built his whole life on a single answer, and the single answer had worked, and the trouble with an answer that works is that it makes you stop asking the question. And he was about to spend the back half of one day in Central Texas watching the question get asked again, by a small wheat-colored dog and a woman who did not raise her voice, and he was going to have to decide, at sundown in front of 40 people, whether he was the kind of man who could hear it. Most men are not. We'll get to whether he was. Day 2 ended with 16 pairs still standing. Day 3 thinned them to 9. The multidiscipline runs were where the program started reaching into the dogs and pulling out whatever was actually in there, and what was in most of them, it turned out, was a brittle thing that performed beautifully right up until the moment it didn't. By the third afternoon, the staging fence had stopped being a place where handlers competed and become a place where they watched. Something had shifted. They had all seen the bite work now. They had all seen the wheat-colored dog ride a 200-pound decoy through a full redirection sequence and out clean on a single quiet word, and they had all done the math on what that meant about everything they had been taught, and the math was uncomfortable, and the discomfort had gone quiet, the way real things do. Delgado sat with Reese at the water station that evening. He didn't ask about the grandfather. He asked about the harness and the timing and the breath she let out before the send, and Reese answered him plainly, because Delgado was asking the way a craftsman asks another craftsman, and there is no pride in that kind of asking, only hunger. "You don't correct her," Delgado said. "It wasn't a question." "I haven't corrected her since she was 14 months old," Reese said. "Before that, barely. You correct a dog when the dog doesn't know what you want. By the time she's grown, if she still doesn't know what you want, that's on me, not her. Correcting her would just be me being mad at her for my own bad teaching." Delgado was quiet for a while. "Argo's the best dog I've ever had," he said finally. "I'd put him against any dog on this course, including yours." He looked across the yard at where Saint lay in the shade by Reese's pack, chin on paws, eyes half closed. "But I yell at him. I yell at him a lot. And I just sat here for 10 minutes watching your dog, and I'm trying to figure out if I yell at him because he needs it or because I do." Reese didn't answer that. It was not the kind of thing you answered for another man. She just said quietly, "Argo'd run through a wall for you, Staff Sergeant. I watched him on the lane. That's not a dog that's afraid of you. That's a dog that loves you and gets yelled at sometimes. Those aren't the same as broken. You'd know if you'd broken him. You haven't." Delgado looked at her. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Reese said. "It's just true. You asked." Delgado huffed a breath that was almost a laugh, the first almost laugh Reese had heard from him in 3 days, and he stood up, and he looked down at her for a second. "My granddad ran dogs," he said. "In the Canal Zone. Long time ago." Yeah. He picked up Argo's bowl. "He'd have liked your dog." He walked back to the shade. Across the yard near the equipment shed, Master Sergeant Roy Cole stood with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand, and he had watched the whole exchange from 60 feet away, and he had not been able to hear a word of it, and he found, to his own irritation, that he badly wanted to know what they had said. The final problem ran at dusk on day 4. They called it the church because it ran in the long concrete bunker at the south end of the base, and because what happened inside it was the closest thing the program had to a reckoning. 9 pairs were left. They would run one at a time. They would not be briefed. They would be walked to a steel door, and the door would open, and whatever was on the other side of the door would be theirs to handle, and the handling, or the failure to handle, would be the last thing the program recorded about them. Here is what was on the other side of the door, and none of the candidates knew it. 140 feet of concrete corridor, branching twice, lit by strobing emergency lights that cut the dark into stutters. Smoke, theatrical, non-toxic, thick enough to drop visibility to about 4 feet. Sound, the omnidirectional rig, pushing a rolling wall of simulated combat, mortar walk, small arms fire, a recorded human voice screaming for a medic, the specific frequencies that decades of data said spiked cortisol in a working dog faster than anything else on Earth. 3 detection hides, 1 explosive scent, 1 human scent, 1 decoy. And at the far end, under a partial collapse of stacked rubble and a flickering red light, a 180-pound rescue mannequin with a human scent source sewn into its chest, pinned under a beam the dog would have to work around to alert on. The pair had 4 minutes. The pair had to clear the corridor, alert correctly on the 2 real hides, ignore the decoy, locate the mannequin, and hold position on the find under the full sound and smoke load until the handler arrived and called the problem. It was designed by Cole. It was designed specifically to find the breaking point of every kind of dog the program had ever seen, because Cole believed, and he was not wrong, that you do not learn what a pair is made of until you take everything away from them except each other. What Cole did not know, what he was about to learn, was that he had built, without meaning to, the single most perfect test on Earth for the exact thing Reese's grandfather had spent 40 years putting into a line of dogs. He had built a machine that punished fear. And he was about to run through it, a dog that did not have any. The first 4 pairs broke. Not all the same way. The breaking is never all the same way. The first dog, a hard Malinois from a hard program, made it 60 feet, hit the first turn, took the full mortar walk and the medic scream at point blank from a speaker hidden in the wall, and spun, and lost the corridor entirely, and began to bite at the smoke, at the air, at nothing, the cortisol flooding the nose right out of commission. The handler went in after him, and the problem was called incomplete. The second dog froze. Just stopped 40 feet in, planted, would not advance, would not retreat, stood in the strobing dark and shook. Incomplete. The third dog, this was the bad one, turned on its handler. Came back down the corridor in the smoke and redirected the fear into the nearest living thing, which was the man who loved it, and put a bite on his forearm through the bite jacket they made all handlers wear in the church for exactly this reason, and the handler called the problem himself, in a flat dead voice, and walked his dog out, and did not look at anyone. The fourth was Petrov. Petrov's Dutch Shepherd made it 90 feet, further than any of them, and found the first hide, and alerted, a good clean alert, and for about 9 seconds it looked like Petrov was going to be the first one through. And then the rig hit the second sound cue, the rolling mortar walk right on top of the medic scream, and the dog that had been panting in the briefing tent on the first morning, the dog whose cortisol had been elevated for 4 straight days, the dog Petrov yanked back by the prong every time it flinched, that dog hit the bottom of whatever reserve it had left, and it quit. Lay down in the smoke. Put its head on its paws under a strobe light, 90 feet into the dark, and quit. Petrov went in and got him. You could hear him in there over the speakers, not yelling, for once not yelling, just saying the dog's name over and over soft. Bruno. Bruno. Smon, Buddy. Bruno. He came out carrying the dog. A grown man carrying a 60-pound Dutch Shepherd in his arms out of a smoke-filled corridor, and the dog was not hurt, the dog was just empty, and Petrov's face was wet and he did not care who saw it. He set the dog down outside in the last gray light. He knelt next to him. And then he did a thing that nobody expected. He looked across the staging area, found Reese, and he held her eyes for a second, and he gave her a single small nod. It was an apology. For the laugh on the first morning. For the loudest laugh on the line. Reese gave him the nod back. Then Petrov bent over his dog and put his forehead against the dog's head and stayed like that, and the program moved on without him. 4 pairs broke. Delgado and Argo ran 5th. And Argo, the missile, the best dog on the course, the dog Delgado would put against any dog alive, Argo made it all the way to the mannequin. He cleared the corridor. He alerted clean on both real hides. He ignored the decoy. He found the mannequin under the rubble at the far end, in the red flicker, under the full sound load. He did everything the problem asked. And then, holding the find, with Delgado 40 feet back and closing through the smoke, Argo broke his hold. Not in fear, in drive. The sound and the smoke and the 4 days had pushed him past the edge of his control and the enormous engine of him spun loose, and he came off the mannequin and started ranging, hunting, looking for something to bite, the aggression with nowhere to go, and when Delgado arrived and gave the down command, Argo did not take it on the first call, or the second, and took it finally on the third, a beat too late. A beat that, in a real building with real operators stacked behind a real door, would have been the beat that got somebody killed. Delgado called the problem complete. It was complete. Argo had found everything. But Delgado knew. Delgado walked Argo out of the church with his jaw set. And he knew, and when he passed Cole at the door he said, before Cole could say anything, 3 calls on the down. I felt it. And Cole, give him this. Cole nodded because it was true, and because Delgado had said it before anyone had to say it to him, and that was its own kind of honor. Delgado walked his missile to the shade. He knelt down and took the dog's head in both hands and looked into his eyes for a long time, and whatever passed between them passed between them. Then he looked up, and he found Reese, who was next, who was already walking Saint toward the steel door. Corporal, Delgado said. Reese stopped. Delgado was still kneeling, still holding his dog's head. It's loud in there, he said. Louder than anything. And it doesn't stop. Reese looked at him. I know, she said. And then she said the thing. She said it quietly, and she said it to Delgado, but she was already looking at the door, and her hand had already dropped to her side where Saint's head was, and Saint had already leaned the side of her face into the palm. Fear is a broadcast. Calm is a choice. Delgado blinked. My grandfather used to say that, Reese said. Every day. It's the whole thing. The rest is just ours. She turned to the door. Behind her, kneeling in the gray dusk with his great loyal exhausted dog's head in his 2 hands, Staff Sergeant Delgado watched her go, and something in his face came open that had not been open in a long time, and he said, almost too quiet to hear, Yeah, it is. The steel door rolled open. The smoke rolled out, and the sound rolled out with it, the mortar walk, the small arms crack, the recorded voice screaming for a medic somewhere in the dark, and the strobe cut the inside of the corridor into 100 frozen stutters, and out of all of it came a wall of the exact frequencies that had broken 4 dogs and cracked the 5th. Reese knelt at the threshold. She did not whisper anything dramatic. She did not grab the dog's face in her hands. She did what she had done at 5 minutes past 5 on the first morning, what she had done on the bite field, what she had done 100,000 times across 6 years and 3 countries and 1 hospice room outside of Brady, Texas. She let out 1 slow breath through her nose. Hold. We're all right. Eyes front. And Saint, who had spent 4 days being called soft, who had spent 6 years being underestimated by everyone except the one woman whose breath she was built around, who carried in her wheat-colored body 40 years of an old man's patient hands. Saint looked once up at Reese, amber eyes steady in the strobing dark, and she did not feel the broadcast because there wasn't one. There was only the choice. Reese stood. She said 1 word, conversational, low, the way you'd say a name to someone next to you on a couch. Find. And the dog went into the dark. The dog went into the dark, and the dark did everything it knew how to do, and the dog did not care. That is the simplest way to say it, and the truest, and Reese, standing at the threshold with the smoke pouring over her and the strobe cutting her into stutters, watched it happen through the only window the program allowed her, which was a low-light monitor mounted beside the steel door, fed by infrared cameras spaced down the corridor. The handler did not enter until the dog held a find. The handler waited at the door. The handler watched her dog go alone into the worst thing the program could build, and the watching was its own test, the test of whether you trusted the thing you had made. Reese trusted the thing she had made. On the monitor, Saint moved through the smoke at a working trot, head at shoulder height, and the first sound cue hit her at 60 feet, the mortar walk, full volume, the speaker 18 inches from her left ear, and her ear flicked once, the small flick that meant heard it, and her body did not break stride. She took the first turn. The medic scream came down on top of her in the dark, that recorded human voice ripping through the corridor, the sound that had spun the first dog into biting at air, and Saint's nose ticked sideways, caught something, and she swung to the right wall and put her nose to a low seam in the concrete and sat. The first hide. The explosive scent. Clean. She held it for exactly as long as the protocol required a dog to hold an unattended alert, which she could not have known, which no dog could be taught, which she did simply because she had been raised by people who never once gave her a reason to abandon a thing before it was finished. And then, when no handler came, she did the correct thing, the thing the protocol scored highest, which was to commit the location to whatever a dog commits things to and continue the search. She found the second hide at the second branch. Human scent, sewn into a panel low on the left wall. Saturday. Held. Continued. She walked past the decoy. She walked past it without slowing, and on the monitor Reese saw the small thing, the thing only she would have caught. Saint's head turned a quarter-inch toward the decoy scent and then turned back, a conscious dismissal, that's not the one. And Reese felt something move in her chest that she did not let reach her face. Because her face did not change about things like that, but it moved, down in the place she did not visit on workdays, and the thing it sounded like was an old man saying, "That's it, that's my girl, that's the whole thing." And then Saint reached the end. The far end of the corridor was the worst of it. The partial collapse, the stacked rubble, the mannequin pinned under the beam with the human sense source sewn into its chest, and over all of it the red strobe and the full sound load stacked on itself, mortar and small arms and the medic scream now looping, layered, a deliberate sensory hell engineered by a man who had spent 30 years learning exactly which sounds take a dog apart. Saint went into it. She worked the rubble. She could not get to the chest directly. The beam was in the way, the mannequin half buried, and a lesser dog, even a good dog, even Argo, had come apart right here at the find, when the problem stopped being a search and became a puzzle under maximum stress. The drive that gets a dog all the way to the end is the same drive that spins loose when the end won't yield. That was the trap. That was the genius and the cruelty of the thing Cole had built. Saint did not spin loose. Saint lay down. On the monitor, in the red flicker, under the full weight of the rig, the small wheat-colored dog lowered her body to the concrete, extended her nose into the gap between the beam and the mannequin's chest where the scent was strongest, pinpointed the source to the exact inch, and held. A passive alert. A down. The lowest energy, highest confidence signal a detection dog can give. The signal that says, "I am certain, I am not leaving, come to me." She put her chin nearly to the floor, and she fixed her nose on the source, and she became, in the middle of the loudest, darkest, worst thing the United States Marine Corps could build, completely and utterly still. The sound rolled over her. She held. The strobe stuttered across her. She held. The medic scream looped, and looped, and looped. She held. At the steel door, the instructor watching the master monitor said, quietly, in a voice that had lost its flatness, "Find. Confirmed. Handler go." Reese went into the dark. She went into it the way she had come into everything for 4 days, which was without hurry and without fear, and she walked the 140 feet of stuttering, smoke-choked corridor with her hands loose at her sides, past the first hide and the second hide and the dismissed decoy, and she came to the end, to the rubble and the red light, and she found her dog lying in the worst of it with her nose on the source, holding. Reese knelt. She put her hand on Saint's back, root to tail, one slow pass. "Show me," she said. You could barely hear it over the rig. It didn't matter. Saint didn't need to hear it. Saint touched her nose to the exact inch once. "Problem complete," Reese said, into her shoulder mic. 2 hides, decoy clear, casualty located and held. Calling it. The rig cut out. All of it. At once. The mortar and the small arms and the looping scream and the strobe, gone, and the silence that dropped into the corridor was so total it had a weight to it, and in that sudden enormous quiet there was only the smoke drifting and the steady red emergency light, and a woman kneeling on concrete with her hand on a dog. "Off duty," Reese said. And Saint, who had not moved a muscle that wasn't asked of her in 4 days, Saint came up off the find and turned and pushed her whole head into Reese's chest, and her tail went low and fast, and Reese wrapped both arms around the dog's neck and put her face down into the wheat-colored fur and stayed like that for a second, 2 seconds, 3, in the quiet and the smoke, where nobody could see her, where her face was allowed to change. "Good girl," she said into the fur. Her voice was not flat. "Good girl. Good girl. We're all right. We did it. We're all right." Saint's tail went, and went, and went. They came out of the church into the last light. The sun was down behind the tree line, and the sky was the deep blue going to black of a Texas evening in the cooling months, and the whole staging area had gone silent in a way it had not been silent in 4 days. Because every one of them, the washed and the standing, Petrov with his empty dog, Delgado with his exhausted one, Wright and Hayes and Becky and Pulaski and the contractors and the instructors, every one of them had watched the master monitor in the staging tent, and every one of them had seen the small dog lie down in the red light and hold. Reese walked Saint to the center of the yard and stopped. She did not look for praise. She did not look at anyone. She stood at parade rest, the dog at her left heel, and she waited, because there was a procedure, because the program ended the way the program ended, with the master sergeant calling the standing pairs forward and reading the result. Cole came out of the staging tent. He had been in there. He had watched the monitor. He had watched the same run everyone else had watched, and whatever had happened on his face in there had happened in private, and now he walked out into the last light with his clipboard in his hand and 40 people watching him and a small wheat-colored dog he had called Soft and a pet standing 40 feet away at the side of a woman he had called Sweetheart at 6 minutes past 5 on the first morning. He stopped. He looked at the clipboard. He did not look at the clipboard because he needed it. He looked at it because a man needs somewhere to put his eyes when he is deciding what kind of man he is going to be, in front of 40 people, at the end of a long day. Here is where most men fail. Most men, standing where Roy Cole was standing, do the thing that protects the thing they built. They find the technicality. They say the run was clean, but the program is about more than one run. They say we'll see how she holds up over a deployment cycle. They keep the word conditional in their mouth and they spit it out one more time, because the alternative is to stand in front of 40 people and the wreckage of 4 broken pairs and a dog that did the impossible, and admit that the thing they said on the first morning was not just wrong but cruel, and that the cruelty was the whole architecture of who they had decided to be a long time ago. Most men cannot do that. Roy Cole stood there for a long time. And then Roy Cole, and this is the part of the story that matters, this is the part you carry, Roy Cole lowered the clipboard. He let it hang at his side. He looked at Reese, and he looked at the dog, and when he spoke he did not pitch his voice for the staging fence the way he had pitched it on the first morning. He spoke at the volume of a man saying a true thing, which carries further than a man saying a loud thing, and the silent yard carried it to every corner. 4 days ago, Cole said, on that line, at 5 in the morning, I crouched down in front of this dog and I looked at her holding a down stay while 40 dogs screamed, and I called her Soft. He stopped. I've been doing this 30 years, he said. And I want to tell you all something I figured out about an hour ago, watching a monitor, and it cost me 4 broken pairs today to figure it out, so I'm going to say it out loud so it doesn't cost any of you 30 years. He looked at the line of handlers. He looked at Petrov, kneeling by his empty dog. He looked at Delgado. I've spent my whole career, Cole said, building dogs that aren't afraid because I yelled the fear out of them. And I was proud of it. And it works. I want to be clear, it works. Those dogs are real. That drive is real. I've gone through real doors behind real dogs I made that way and I'm standing here because of it. He paused. But there's a difference. And I didn't have a word for the difference until today, and I still don't have a good one, so I'm going to use hers. He looked at Reese. Fear is a broadcast, Cole said. Calm is a choice. Reese's face did not change, but her hand at her side found the top of Saint's head and rested there. I make dogs that override the broadcast, Cole said. Loud enough, hard enough, long enough, and a good dog will override its own fear to do the job. And I called that brave. He shook his head once. That dog right there, he lifted his chin toward Saint, didn't override anything. There was nothing to override. Her handler never put the broadcast in her in the first place. 6 years. Probably more. Never once gave that animal a reason to be afraid of the person calling the commands. So when I built the loudest room I know how to build, the room that's broken better dogs than any of you have ever seen, and I put her in it alone, there was no fear in there to find. There was just a dog doing her job, because the one human being in her whole life she answers to was standing at a door breathing slow and telling her we're all right. The yard was completely silent. I called that soft, Cole said. 4 days ago. In front of all of you. He looked at Reese. And Master Sergeant Roy Cole, in front of 40 people, in the last blue light of the 4th day, did the thing that almost no man ever does. Corporal Reese, he said. I was wrong. I was wrong on the line, I was wrong out loud, and I owed you that out loud, so there it is. I'm sorry. He let it stand. And you didn't pass conditional, he said. Strike that word off everything I said to you this week. You and Saint had the cleanest final problem I have run in this program in 9 years. The cleanest. You're not in the 4. You're first of the 4. He looked down the line at Delgado. Staff Sergeant Delgado and Argo, you're in. 3 calls on the down and a hell of a dog. You're in, and you knew the truth about your own run before I did, and that's the second thing this program is for. He named the other 2 pairs that had made it, and then he looked back at Reese, and he said the last thing, and the last thing was quiet. Your grandfather, Cole said. The one who said it. Fears a broadcast. Yes, Master Sergeant. He's still running dogs somewhere? Because I'd drive to wherever it is and I'd shake his hand and I'd tell him he was right and I was wrong, and I haven't said that to a man in 20 years. Reese was quiet for a second. Her hand was on Saint's head. No, Master Sergeant, she said. He passed. 2 years ago. Spring. Cole looked at her. The whole yard looked at her. The last thing he ever said to me, Reese said, and her voice was steady flat, even the voice she had used for 4 days, but everyone there could hear what it cost to keep it that way, from a hospice bed, with this dog lying on his boot, was don't let them yell at her, Laney. Promise me. Don't ever let them yell at her. Silence. So, Reese said. I promised him. And I've kept it. That's the whole thing, Master Sergeant. The rest is just ours. Roy Cole stood very still. And then slowly, in front of 40 people, the man who had crouched down at 5 in the morning to prove he wasn't afraid of a soft little dog, Roy Cole crouched down again. Slow this time. Not to prove anything. He went down on one knee in the dirt at a respectful distance, and he looked at the wheat-colored dog across 10 feet of Texas evening, and he didn't reach for her, and he didn't use the soft voice, and he didn't do a single thing to her at all. He just looked at her for a long moment. And then he said to the dog quietly, Your grandpa was right. Saint looked back at him with her steady amber eyes, and she read him the way she had read him on the first morning, the whole of him in a second, and whatever she found in him this time, she found enough of it that her tail moved once slow against the dirt. Cole stood up. He brushed his knee off, the same gesture from the first morning, but it meant the opposite thing now. Get her some chow, he said, and his voice was rough. She earned it. They drove out the next morning. Reese and Saint, in a base-issue pickup, north out of Camp Bowie toward the highway, the windows down and the cool Texas air coming in. Saint sat in the passenger seat the way she always sat, upright, watching the world go by, occasionally turning to check that Reese was still Reese. Petrov had found Reese at the trucks before they left. He'd had his dog with him, the Dutch shepherd, who looked rested, who looked already, after one night, a little less like a drawn bowstring. Petrov hadn't said much. He'd said, "I'm taking him home. I'm not, he's not for this. I figured that out in there." And Reese had said that sounded like a good dog and a good decision, and Petrov had crouched down and looked at Saint and said, "Thank you. I don't totally know for what, but thank you." And he'd driven off south toward home, with a dog he was going to stop yelling at. Delgado had found her too. He hadn't said much either. Men like Delgado don't. He'd just put out his hand and Reese had shaken it, and he'd said, "I'm gonna try the harness," and Reese had said, "Start slow, he's grown, give him a reason to choose it," and Delgado had nodded, and that was the whole conversation, and it was everything. Now it was just the two of them and the highway. About 20 miles out, Reese pulled the truck onto the shoulder. She didn't know exactly why, except that she did. She put it in park and she sat for a second with her hands on the wheel and the engine ticking and the wide flat Texas morning going gold and green out past the windshield. And then she turned in the seat and she looked at her dog, who was already looking at her, the way she always was. "We did it, Pop," Reese said, out loud to nobody, to the dog, to the morning. "We kept it clean." Nobody yelled at her. Not once, in there. "I kept it." Saint leaned across the seat and put her head against Reese's chest, and Reese wrapped both arms around her and held her, on the shoulder of a highway in central Texas, in the gold light, and her face changed, finally, all the way it was only ever allowed to change with the dog, and she let it, because there was nobody there to see except the one creature on earth she would never have to perform for. "Good girl," she said, into the wheat-colored fur. "Good girl. The whole thing. You were the whole thing." Saint's tail moved, slow, against the seat. After a while Reese sat up, and wiped her face once with the back of her hand, and put the truck back in drive. "Okay," she said. "Eyes front." And Saint faced front. And they pulled back onto the highway, the woman and the dog, north into the morning, and the old man was not there, and the old man was everywhere, in every quiet breath, in every choice not to be afraid, in the line of an animal he had held under the ribs at 6 weeks old like she was made of something he was afraid of breaking, and she was not broken. She was never going to be broken. That was the whole thing. The rest is just ours. One last thing. 6 months later, a thick envelope arrived at a forwarding address in central Texas, stamped with a unit Reese didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper was a program memo. The multi-purpose canine selection at Camp Bowie had been revised. There was a new module, added to day 1 mandatory, ahead of all bite work and all stress work. It was called Connection Baseline, and the description ran 4 paragraphs, and the 4 paragraphs were, almost word for word, the things Reese had said at a water station and a steel door over 4 days in the fall. There was a line near the bottom that read, "A dog does not override the broadcast. The handler chooses not to transmit it." At the very bottom, in handwriting, in pen, couldn't find a better way to say it. Didn't try too hard. R.C. The photograph was of Roy Cole, in the staging yard at Bowie, down on one knee in the dirt. In front of him was a young handler, couldn't have been more than 19, and a green dog, a puppy really, a wheat-colored Malinois with a dark mask and ears too big for its head, sitting in a clumsy, eager, wobbling stay. Cole wasn't crouched to prove he wasn't afraid. He was crouched the other way. The new way. The way he'd learned in the last blue light of the 4th day. On the back of the photograph, in the same pen, 3 words. "Eyes front, Corporal."